This is episode 10 of Baba Yaga's Magic, Slavic Cloth Magic. Cloth is a very important part of Slavic witchcraft and magic, from processing the fibers to spinning, to weaving, to sewing and embroidery. Cloth has always been a deeply powerful source of magic for protection, fertility, abundance, love, and blessings of all kinds. In this episode, I'll be teaching you about the special spirits and goddesses associated with spinning and weaving, the magic of cloth, the special kinds of cloth items that are used in magic, such as the rushnyk, the krayka, and the vyshyvanka, and showing you how you can incorporate this magic into your own practice. No loom required. But before we dive in, do you wish that you knew how to read tarot cards effortlessly? Would you like to be able to turn your love of the tarot into a lucrative career? It might seem like an impossible dream, but I can teach you how to read the tarot cards in a way that is joyful, fun, and will open up those amazing aha moments when the mystery of tarot will all make sense. I remember what it was like to want to learn the tarot and not knowing where to begin. I remember when I was in my teens, I had a tarot deck, but I didn't know what to do. I thought you had to memorize an entire book's worth of card meanings, even to begin to learn to read tarot. If you are that person now and you have struggled with understanding the mystery of the cards, if you've tried to memorize the meanings of each of the cards only to give up in frustration and disgust, I remember just being so frustrated by it. If you still look up the meanings of the cards in a book when you do your readings, then get ready to have your mind blown. Not only do you not have to memorize the meanings of the cards, I will free you from tarot books and you'll be doing readings from our very first meeting. You can go from tarot novice to professional tarot reader by March of 2023. Our beginning workshop series starts November 6th, advanced series starts January 8th, and professional series starts February 12th. Each series is 5 weeks long, and the workshops are 2 hours each, and they take place on Sunday afternoon. You will gain amazing, invaluable experiencing practicing one-on-one with other students in a very safe and supportive environment. But if you have to miss a class or want to review, you'll have the recordings to watch afterwards. If you would like to be a tarot reader finally this year and make it happen for yourself, go to losangelestaroreader.com and sign up. I would love to have you in the workshops. The workshops start in November, so you don't have too long to do it. So go ahead and go to losangelestaroreader.com and sign up. All right, so let's talk about cloth magic. In a traditional Slavic home, the Slavic hut, the home, the small little home that most peasants lived in, was called in Ukraine a chata. And every peasant chata had a same format, the same layout. Not only were things laid out in the same way, they were laid out in the same direction. In this one room hut, there would be 4 different corners with 4 different purposes. There was a corner for sleeping in the south, a corner for the big wood stove called the peach that was used for cooking and heating, and that would be in the west. The pokut, or the home altar, would be in the east, and there was a corner for spinning and weaving in the north. In the past, every single one of these peasant homes had a loom. If you didn't have a loom, what would happen? You would have no clothes, no blankets, no tablecloths, right? These things were all created in the home, from processing the fibers all the way through embroidering the beautiful fabric. It was all created originally and by hand. This offered an opportunity for magic. We create beautiful magic in Ukraine for creating these artifacts, vyshyvanka, which are the blouses, rushnyk, which are the beautiful blessed cloths that we use to bless our homes or bless our bread or protect our loved ones, or we use them in important rituals. In the Ukrainian home, there were special seasons for making cloth. In the winter, when everyone was tucked up in their homes anyway, it was cold outside. You wouldn't be out in the fields working. That was the time for doing your weaving magic. After the sun had gone down and everyone had been fed, the women of the home would go to the wooden looms that were carved with magical symbols of protection, and they would begin weaving and singing as they wove. The singing was a really important part of the weaving because Ukrainian songs have incantations in them. Many of these songs are coded incantations. They talk about different important plants, or they talk about spirits, or they talk about wishes. So not only is singing used to make oneself happy, which is, if you've been following along with Slavic magic, you know how important it is that the mindset be in a peaceful state, a happy state, an optimistic state whenever you're making a magical object. The singing would make us happy, of course, but it also created this incantation that was woven into the fabric. When we had that light soul, that happy, joyful state, and we brought these incantations and we made a powerful, powerful artifact whenever we wove. Now, when you were weaving, there were also things like omens. You would pay attention, very close attention to your weaving and your spinning. When you were spinning, you would make sure that you would spin your thread very evenly. If you were weaving, you would want to make sure that you didn't break your thread as you were weaving, because breaking your thread was a bad omen. It could mean bad luck of all kinds. So you wanted to be very careful. You wanted to be very conscientious, and you wanted to be very skillful when you did your weaving, because you were creating something magic. Spinning, which is taking fibers and turning them into threads or yarn, is magic in and of itself. The threads that we spin in the physical world really mimic the invisible divine threads that connect everything. Everything is connected. Everything has life force, and everything is connected. And these threads symbolize that. They represented the idea that you can connect to other things, you can pull other things towards you. It ties everything together. So the thread itself was seen as a very, very powerful magical item. This isn't just in Slavic magic, by the way. We see this across the board. In Slavic magic, of course, we see this. There's many spirits and saints associated with spinning and weaving. Baba Yaga, for example, Baba Yaga, Baba Yaga, Yezi Baba, and so on. She was a spinner, and oftentimes she gives, maybe she's sitting at her loom in a story, or she gives the assignment to the heroine, usually not to the hero, but to the heroine, to do some spinning or weaving. There's a saint called Saint Friday, also called Paraskeva Pianitsia, and she is a weaving saint, a folk saint. Now, she's been elevated to be a real saint, but we know that she represented an old folk saint, which then goes back to an old folk spirit, a folk goddess, and was turned into a saint. She's the patron saint of spinners and weavers. We also have the goddess Mokash, and Mokash is the goddess of spinning and weaving and many other things as well. She's a mother goddess, old ancient mother goddess, and she also has an association with spinning and weaving. If you've heard my past episode about the rusalki are the water spirits, and they are master weavers, master spinners, and they would sing and spin as they would sit on the riverbanks. They would create this cloth, and the cloth that they created, they would wash it in the river and lay it on the banks to dry. That cloth was not only beautiful, finely made, perfectly made, but so powerful that if you would step on that cloth as you know it was drying there, you would lose the ability to walk. So wasn't to be messed with. Spinning, and as I mentioned before, spinning is the act of destruction and creation. It's an act of creation. You're destroying the fibers to create thread. If you learn about how fibers are made, fibers like flax, hemp, wool, you have to do some destruction. You're pounding that flax to make it into fibers so that you can spin it. You're shearing the sheep, taking away the sheep's coat to make that beautiful wool yarn that you're going to weave into something. Same thing with hemp. Hemp was pounded and made into fibers, destroyed so that it could be made into fibers that could be spun to make thread. A spindle was traditionally used, and when I say a spindle, I mean a spindle, not a spinning wheel. So a spinning wheel is a later creation. has only been around for a few hundred years, but a spindle, which is a long stick, usually with a weight of some kind on it, or the stick itself is carved into a shape that allows it to sort of hang and have a weight at one end. The spindle was the ancient tool of magic, of this magic of creation. That spindle is a long, skinny stick. And so, as a long, skinny stick, it can be used in many ways like a wand, like a magic wand. And then we find many spells using spindles for casting circles and doing things like that. You can use it for divination, use it as a pendulum, many other things. But we're not going to get into those things. We're going to be talking about using a spindle for what it's used for, supposed to be used for, which is for spinning. If you are going to be a devotee of Baba Yaga, or you're going to immerse yourself in Slavic magic, it really behooves you to learn how to spin. Not that you're going to need to spin fibers to, pound fibers, spin those fibers into thread and weave your own clothing or weave your curtains, although that would be amazing. But to create the act of spinning is a meditative act and a magical act. And even if all that you do with your spinning is make some beautiful yarn, you can take that yarn and turn it into magical knots. You can attach it to things, use it to hold things together. And so it's quite magical yarn, even if you're not going to be weaving or taking it, from beginning to end. Even back a few generations, every Slavic woman knew how to spin. All people had a spindle in their home because all people had a loom in their home. If you were of the peasant class, you had to create your own fabric. You couldn't go to the store and buy fabric. Only wealthy people could do that. And the vast majority of the agrarian culture in Ukraine was peasant class. Women would grow their own flax and hemp, they would shear their sheep, and they would spin their yarn or their thread. And each item of clothing, each blanket, each rushnyk, each vyshyvanka, each blanket that was hung on the wall, each curtain, everything that was made in the home, made out of cloth, was made in the home. And so it was imbued with the beautiful energy of the weaver. You knew it had power because the person who spun it was focused on the protection and blessing of the home. So you can understand not only was the skill of weaving and spinning important to just function in life, but it was also important as a magical skill. The thread that was spun with love and intention really became a part of the protection of the home, or protection of yourself, or protection of your loved ones as they wore the clothing that was made with all of this magic in it. The spider is a very important, another, I would say, spirit, maybe a power animal in this idea of weaving and spinning. As you know, the spider spins that thread. And so the pavuk, or the spider, was an important sacred symbol of that weaver. So there was traditions about not killing a spider, because if you killed a spider, there would be no happiness in your home. There was also the belief that if a spider came down from the ceiling, it was bringing good news to you. So the symbol of the spider is very powerful and very important for weavers and spinners, not just in Slavic magic. We see it showing up in Greek magic and other cultures as well. Now, when you create your own clothing, or you create your own cloth, or you create your own thread, you have the opportunity to put your energy into it, to put your intentions into it. So you can think about those people in ancient times who really took it from the very, very beginning with rituals and incantations and songs and words and thoughts and ideas, as they took the whole process from beginning to end to make those pieces of clothing. Very, very powerful. If you are going to do some spinning or some embroidery or some sewing, or you're going to make some fiber, I mean, who knows how far you take it. Before you begin doing this work, any of this work, spinning or weaving or sewing, take a moment to close your eyes and center yourself and envision the magic that you want to create. Thank the spirit of the fiber, and thank the gods and spirits and goddesses, I should say goddesses, because they're really goddesses, the goddesses and spirits of weaving as they assist you, and ask for their magic to be imbuing the item that you're working on. If you're working with a spindle, as you work with your spindle, you want to start with a tuft of fibers and spin it until it's complete. The belief was back in the old days that if you left unspun fibers, you could invite a mischievous spirit to spin your destiny for you. You don't want that. You don't want anyone messing with your magic. So before you would go to sleep at night, you would always finish your spinning for the day and leave your spindle wrapped with some threads. There's an old saying in Ukrainian that says a spindle should never go hungry, meaning you shouldn't have an empty spindle spinning sitting around. If you are finished spinning, put your spindle away. You can leave it with the thread that's on it, or if there's no thread on it, if you wound it all up, you can take a piece of thread, yarn, or thread off of the ball of yarn that you've taken off and wrap it around the spindle 9 times to keep it fed and to keep it active as a magical tool. When you're learning how to spin at the beginning, you're going to spin and your thread is going to be thick and thin and have kind of be a little wonky. It's very cute to see, people's first spinning efforts. They're actually quite charming. They've got a lot of character to them. But as you get better and better, your spinning is going to get more and more even. So I encourage people who are learning how to spin magical threads to start learning how to spin non-magical threads before committing to spinning your magical threads. When you're spinning your real, true magical threads, you can do a divination with your spinning by paying attention to what the thread tells you about your immediate future. For example, if your thread is smooth and even with no knots, it means that for the foreseeable future, you're going to have smooth, peaceful, and uneventful times. It's going to be nice, easy going times. If your thread gets tangled or knotted, it means you'll have events showing up in your life and you'll gain experience from those events. Well, sometimes those are positive events, sometimes not so positive, but you're going to have events showing up if you have knots and tangles. If your thread is even, it means riches and good health. If your thread is uneven, well, you should make sure that you're going to improve your finances and your health, and you want to focus on that. Once you learn the art of weaving, you can think about weaving as a way of creating your own destiny. The thread of your life will be reflected in the thread that you weave. So if your life is not to your satisfaction, you can always spin or weave yourself a better one. Cultures all over the world and throughout history have recognized that weaving has deep spiritual significance. The thread is really the symbol of destiny in life. We see this in Greek mythology, the 3 fates who spin, measure, and cut the thread of each person's life, for example. The patterns that we weave with our thread can affect our physical condition and the direction that our life takes. Ancient people understood the magic of transforming those fibers into cloth, and that's an act of creating beauty from chaos. So if you'd like a life that's more serene, more beautiful, more abundant, more blessed, then working with cloth can do that if you start to view it as a magical act. Every village had different weaving patterns, different embroidery patterns, and they reflected where people were from. Nowadays, people might pick a pattern based on what they want to attract in their life, not necessarily based on where they're living. But just know that in the past that there were particular patterns and particular designs that were used in each village that would help you identify the person wearing the item or holding the item. You can identify where they were from, maybe even what family they were from. Those symbols that were woven in and embroidered on had deep mystical significance. So people, nowadays, most people don't really think about, the average person doesn't think about the mystical significance of the symbols, but the desire to understand that and to go back to pagan times is really being revived right now. And there's chapters in my book, Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, that explain the patterns, spinning, weaving, embroidery, and so on. And it talks about those patterns and the importance and the significance of those patterns. When I started my own journey to connect more deeply with Baba Yaga, I really understood that I had to not only learn how to spin, but I had to learn how to weave. And so I learned how to spin with a drop spindle. And that's what I'm going to be teaching in the class that I have coming up. But I also learned how to weave on a loom, and I began with something small. Obviously, I'm not going to begin by starting a big piece of cloth or something like that. So I started with a krayka. A krayka is a woven belt that is wrapped around the waist and tied. The krayka itself is a protection talisman. So I bought a band weaving loom called an inkle loom, and I began to weave my first belt. And it was at first, a struggle to keep it even, but as I went along, it got more and more even. And it was really quite a gratifying experience to do that. So I encourage you, if you are intimidated or think that you have to get a giant loom to begin weaving, inkle loom is quite small, and you can you can create a beautiful belt or bands or ribbons or things like that with the inkle loom, and get that magical weaving to be part of your practice. Spinning and weaving both have a meditative rhythmic quality that allows you to drift into magical realms of consciousness and visualization, and you can commune with the spirit world even. Each time that I do my weaving or I do my spinning, I imagine that thread really connecting me to my ancestors who wove. And we all have ancestors who spun and wove, because cloth was not something that was bought. It was something that was made. And so we all have ancestors. If you go back far enough, you have ancestors that were spinners and weavers. And so it really connects you back to your ancestral line. There's a magic in weaving as well, not only as just the act of creating these items for your home, but there could be special items that were woven in one day. This is a very Slavic magical practice where you would create something from beginning to end in one day. A whole community would get together. Maybe somebody was going off to war and they needed a special magical shirt to wear so that they would be protected. Or maybe there was a pandemic going on of some kind, or an epidemic going on, and you wanted to protect the community. So the women of the community would get together, they would bring their flax fibers, they would beat the flax into fibers, they would spin it into thread, and then set up a loom and weave the cloth, and then create the artifact, whether that was a piece of cloth to protect the town or village, or if it was a shirt. It would all be done in a 24-hour time period. And that magical item that was done from beginning to end in 24 hours with lots of intensity and lots of focus became a very powerful magical talisman. Sometimes they would create an article like a cloth that was created for something that might be destroyed in the process. Like you might create this cloth to protect your village from an epidemic, and then part of the process might be burning the cloth. But not all magical cloths were destroyed. Most of them, in fact, were not destroyed. When we think about the beautiful cloths that are embroidered, for example, they might even be handed down from generation to generation, or buried with someone, that created it, because it was such a powerful item. Cloths like rushnyk, which are the beautiful long blessed cloths that are embroidered, would be used for wrapping a baby, and that piece of linen or that piece of hemp that the baby was wrapped in could then be turned into a wedding rushnyk, that when that child grew up and they were ready to get married, the bride and the groom would be ritually tied together with that beautiful cloth. That cloth could also be put into the coffin of the person when they died, or kept by the family. So cloth had a lot of importance. It had a lot of value. People really saw the value in cloth because it was such hard labor to make the cloth. So it would be mended and repaired, and things usually weren't cast aside or thrown away, especially the magical ones. So let's see what else. As I mentioned before, we had not only the magical rushnyk, but we had the belts, the krayka. The belts would be worn around the waist to protect the person from harm, and so it was sort of to create a magic circle around the person to protect them from the spirit realm. However, if you wanted to work in the spirit realm, perhaps you were doing magic or you were doing divination, part of the ritual would be to take off your krayka and to take off that protection so that you could traverse into the spirit realm more easily to do your divination or to do your magic. Where walking around without a belt was a no-no. So this was something that was done very exclusively in private when you were doing magic, and magic usually was done in private. If you would walk around town without a belt on, it was pretty scandalous. It's like kind of walking around in your underwear would be today. It would be a little bit off-putting and people would be like a little freaked out by it. So to untie your krayka or to not wear a belt at all was considered to be a compromising situation. It was almost seen as dishonorable. And a term actually to call somebody dishonorable was to say they were unbelted, or if they committed some outrageous act, it would say they took their belt off. So it was really a very, very important magical item to be seen with a belt on or to have your belt on. Nowadays, of course, you're not going to be walking around with a krayka on, but you could use your krayka, or you could have a thread or a small krayka underneath your clothing. You could also put a krayka on before you're going to do magic and then remove it when you do your magic. If you were walking around without a krayka, people might suspect that you're working in the spirit world, that you are a witch, or that you were a spirit yourself. So oftentimes we identify spirits who look like humans, for example, the rushnyk or the Slavic or a mavka. These spirits would be recognized because they weren't wearing a belt. They were in the spirit realm. And that would be one way of identifying them and seeing that they weren't just a normal person that you didn't know. Let's see. So if you are working with your layers of magic and you are thinking about cloth now in a very different way, your clothing can be this beautiful talisman. Just as your clothing really protects you from the scorching sun or the cold of the winter winds, your clothing can also be a spiritual protection. It can attract love, it can encourage fertility or bring abundance. I mean, there's all kinds of things that cloth and magical cloth can do. One of the ways that we can create and make magical cloth is by embroidery. When you see those vyshyvanki, the beautiful embroidered shirts and shifts and blouses that are worn by Ukrainian people, they aren't just pretty decorations. They have magical meaning, those symbols and those shapes that are embroidered in. Vyshyvanki are covered with sacred symbols. And if you'd like to know more about these symbols, you can go into my book, Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, or you can see chapter 1 by going to Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft.com. And when you go to that site page on my site, you will see a link to see chapter 1, which is all about embroidery. And you can see these beautiful embroidered patterns and see what they mean. And you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. For men, on a vyshyvanka, there would be embroidery on the wrists that would protect from negativity going underneath the clothing at the wrist area, around the neck, also to protect evil and negativity or bad luck or the evil eye or curses or anything like that from getting on the person. And you would also see embroidery on the chest. This embroidery on the chest was to give courage and strength. On women's vyshyvanki, the embroidery designs go in different places. We see embroidery on the bottom of the shift, on the neck and the wrists to keep out evil and to keep out negativity. But we also see beautiful embroidery on the sleeves, and that is to give strength to the arms that are taking care of the children, taking care of their loved ones. Strong arms are good things. So yeah, so that would give strength and protection to the arms. You can also make, you might not have the time or the energy to embroider a beautiful vyshyvanka, but you can make a small embroidered charm. An embroidered charm could be just one symbol on embroidery cloth. And I teach you how to make that in chapter 1 of Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft. And that you can see by going to Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft.com. These embroidered charms were not just sewn on vyshyvanka. They would also be sewn and sewn onto the rushnyk. And the rushnyk is that beautiful towel that we use, that beautiful cloth that we use, a ritual cloth that we use in blessing home, blessing food, and so on. Now, in a minute, I'm going to tell you how to make a beautiful embroidered charm, but I'd like to share a very special VIP one-on-one experience that you can have with me. The new year is coming. On January 1st, you can still be in the same place you are now, or you can completely empower yourself and conquer your challenges and magically with me right by your side every step of the way. Imagine for a moment having a life where each day you have the delight of receiving a delicious spiritual practice from me, Madam Pamita, that imbues your day with magic and the start of creating rituals that will amplify power, joy, and abundance in ways that are life changing. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the 30-day magical mindset makeover. Over the course of 30 days, with me right by your side, you'll learn how to do magic, real magic, and you will believe in your own power to direct your life and will have the knowledge and the tools to do so. Each day, you'll have the delight of receiving an exquisite magical item to open up and a magical practice to go with it and learn a new empowering skill. You can find out more about the 30-day magical mindset makeover and sign up to get on the waiting list to be notified once spaces become available. Prices for this amazing bespoke experience will be going up in 2023. So make sure to get on the waiting list now so you can get on today's pricing. Just go to magicalmindsetmakeover.com and you can find out more. Now, back to our embroidery. Throughout history, talismanic cloth was woven, and we have evidence of these complex stitches being added to cloth for extra protective power as early as the Bronze Age. That is thousands of years ago. Embroidery styles have evolved over the centuries, and today, most of the vyshyvanki that we see are cross-stitch designs that really became popular in the 19th century. Cross-stitch designs are special because before a cross-stitch was used, it would be difficult to create designs that brought in leaves, fruits, flowers, and plants. And fruits, flowers, plants are so beautiful and magical and so meaningful in Slavic magic. Once cross-stitch came in on the scene, however, those symbols were possible to make. The cross-stitch itself is very, very powerful. Each cross is made up of two stitches that make an X, and an X is a symbol of protection. When you're embroidering that X of the cross stitch, the first part of the cross stitch initiates the opening of the new reality that you're creating, and the second stitch fixes that new reality into place. The completed X splits, crosses out, and negates any unwelcome energies and enhances and protects the positive ones. Our ancestors embroidered symbols of nature, abstract symbols of protection, and even hidden images of goddesses in their embroideries to protect themselves, to protect their loved ones, and protect their homes against negativity, and to invite blessings, abundance, spiritual connection, health, wealth, all of the good things that we all want. In all styles of embroidery, the symbols have meaning. Colors of the thread have meaning, and embroidering those colors onto white or natural colored cloth also had significance, whether it was white on white, which is unique to some areas of Ukraine, bold black and red on white, or complex multicolored designs. As I mentioned before, each region, each area, each village had their own designs that they used to do. Now, there are several ways that you can create a talismanic cross stitch to bless and protect you. You can stitch a single symbol into a piece of cloth and pin that embroidered cloth onto your clothing or carry it with you in your wallet or your purse. You could also create a repeating pattern and turn your embroidered cloth into a patch or a pouch. If you're really into it and you're a very advanced stitcher, you might want to embroider clothing along the cuffs, the collars, or the hem, or along the front or along the sleeves for protection and to bring in those extra beautiful blessings. When you begin your work of doing this stitching, or weaving or spinning, new work was always started during the waxing moon, the cycle of the time of the moon cycle. When the moon appears to be getting larger, it's after the new moon and before the full moon. Just as the moon was growing, the protection and blessings that you were creating would grow as well. Stitching in folk Tradition is always can be done on any day of the week except Fridays and holidays. Fridays were holy to the weaving saints, Mokash, Paraskeva Pianitsia, and the Rusalki. That was their special day. So to honor them, no weaving, no spinning, no embroidery was done on those days. Holidays also were times when weaving, spinning, and embroidery were forbidden. You were supposed to be eating, sitting with the family, enjoying yourself, and it was a time that the spirits would be doing that weaving and spinning. So you would avoid it on those days. When you sit to stitch, before you get started, as I mentioned before, you want to center yourself and get into a meditative mindset. Whenever you're creating a talisman, whether it's spinning thread or embroidering, you want to be in a positive state of mind so that you imbue that into the work that you're doing. What you're thinking and what you're feeling goes into your magical work in Slavic belief systems. And so it would be locked into that magical item. If you were peaceful and happy when you were stitching, great, you were going to have peace and happiness come out of that artifact. But if you were frustrated or, really riled up about something, or anxious or angry or unhappy, it really is not the time to make your talisman. First, work on your emotions, get into a calm state of mind, and then work on your talisman. When you're stitching, you can meditate on each cross stitch as a cross that initiates and locks in your intention, the intention of your spell as you make it. If you're embroidering cross stitch style, you would not make any knots in your stitching, as it was believed that those knots would create unnecessary impediments to your blessings. If you'd like to see the beautiful patterns that you can embroider with cross stitch, go again to Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft.com for chapter 1, or check it out in the book, Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, and you'll see the patterns that you can embroider. Lastly, I'm going to leave these very, very wise words with you. So into the threads you spin, you put your words, your prayers, and your intention. And what you spin and weave is what you create. If you learn to spin, you learn to weave, you learn to sew or embroider, like the spider, you will learn to master the magic of creation. You will understand the connection of all things, and you will be able to make very powerful magic. Take the fibers of your life and spin them into the useful thread that will become the warmth, the protection, the abundance, and the love that you want to have in your life. Roll that thread into a ball of yarn, and roll that ball to find your destiny. Well, that about does it for this episode of Baba Yaga's Magic. If you would like to get even more information about Slavic magic, then check out the Learn page over at parlourofwonders.com, where you will find a ton of resources, including workshops, blog articles, past podcast episodes, how-to guides, which I've just redone the how-to guides page, and it looks beautiful now. And you can also find a way to join me live over Zoom for the Magic Q&A Tea Party. Every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern, you can join me and ask your questions about magic, Slavic magic, regular magic, spirituality, divination, you name it. Just go to parlourofwonders.com and click on the Learn tab to see all the goodies there. I want to say thank you to all the Spell Squad members out there who have subscribed to and shared this podcast with your friends. You guys are awesome. Thank you to the fabulous folks who have left reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. Love you guys. Thank you to Gilles Navarre for production and engineering. Thank you to you for joining me. And I'm looking forward to our next episode when we'll be learning the magic of the Slavic wood stove. Until next time, this is Madam Pamita and Baba Yaga saying Za Mahiyu to magic, and may all of your stories have the happiest fairy tale endings.